Hi, welcome to Quid Pros Quo. I'm Zach,
And I'm Rin.
and today we are talking about tips for writing contests from the judge's perspective. I'm going to offer a self-indulgent question. Rin, why are we doing this?
Zach, you just finished your second year as a judge for the Salt Lake City Scribes annual writing contest, which is so cool. And I've never participated in a writing contest, so I want to know more about them.
Awesome. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Writing contests, I want to give a little plug for writing contests as something that you should consider participating in. Um, if you are just beginning as a writer, like you've never published anything and you're moving in the direction of wanting to publish a short story or a book, um, writing contests are a great way to dip your feet into a more professional brand of creative writing. It will help you to learn about conventions as well as the process of asking for and receiving feedback. And it's also a good way to network with the people inside of your area who are interested in writing. Um, that's actually one of the big things that I want to point out with writing contests is that whenever possible, you should look for local writing contests. Um, because first of all, they're smaller, so the competition isn't as fierce, so you're more likely to win than like a national writing contest. But I think the more important thing is becoming more aware of the kinds of writing groups and clubs that exist inside of your community so that you can connect with them. Because writing can sometimes be lonely, and we don't like being lonely here at Quid Pro Quo. So you should definitely consider looking for those local contests.
Yeah, I love that. I love that we don't like being lonely here at Quid Pros Quo because that's so true. We are so much about like building community, and also loneliness is literally bad for your health, says
Yes,
the
it is.
biologist who has read like so many papers on this.
Hmm.
Notably because I'm a depressed biologist and I am like yeah. Anyways, that's enough said. Um, so before we like get into like the nitty gritty, are there any absolute do or do nots for writing contests that we should know ahead of time?
Ooh, yes. Okay. Do not ignore formatting requirements. Like, do not. Do just make sure that your story is formatted in the way that they ask for, because if you don't, it's more likely that your story will get rejected outright and nobody will ever read it. Um, do not, under any circumstances, write any notes for the judges. Let your study or let your story speak for itself. Um, you don't want to put any introduction or acknowledgments or anything like that. Just give us your story. Um, and then an absolute do for a short story is anonymize your submission. Again, if you don't, it's likely that your story will be thrown out. But
Mhm.
what um anonymizing is that you're removing your name from everywhere inside of the story. And I want to assure you, being on the side of the on the judge's perspective, we do not have any desire to steal your story. There is no chance that we will steal your story because the purpose is not for us to like usually the people who are judging these are also writers and they want to pursue their own ideas, not copy other people. So you don't need to be worried about that. But you do want to provide that anonymity because it allows us to offer more effective feedback.
Awesome. So that's like really good like ways to like start out. So you want to follow your formatting requirements, not write notes, and anonymize your submission. Tell us how like the judging side of things works. Like how do you do that? Do you have like a rubric?
Yeah, that's a great question. So for the contests that I have judged for, we use a rubric. I I have mixed feelings about rubrics. On the one hand, I don't like them because I feel like it's so difficult to like numerically um rank stories. And they're not always super precise, but along with that, rubrics help standardize the kind of feedback between different judges. So it helps everybody to be on the same page about what they need to comment on and what they need to be looking at. Um, and ultimately they do actually reflect the quality of the work in general, even if the particulars are a little rough. When I was, working through the stories, there were a lot of them where I was like, I'm not sure if this one is like a 6 or a 7. Maybe this one is like a 4, and then this one is like a 10, maybe a 9. Like some of those things I wasn't super certain about, but when I looked at it as a whole, I was like, oh, this story had the highest rating, and it was the one that was the best. So the rubric was still helpful in helping to recognize which stories were the best written.
That makes sense. Can we as participants get the rubrics? And if we do, like, how do we get them?
Um, I my understanding is that there isn't anything secret about these rubrics. Um, like it's not like having the rubric is going to give you a super unfair advantage. And it may vary from contest to contest. Some contests might not use rubrics at all, but it doesn't hurt to email the organizing organization, and ask, do you use a rubric? And if so, can I have a copy to look at my story? And that can be a really helpful revision tool, because you can go through and you can say, okay, this is what they're looking for. Am I delivering on that?
That makes sense. Um, in terms of what we're actually submitting to the competition, what is it? Is it short stories? Is it first chapters? How do you like, yeah, short stories, the first chapters, or full novels? Like, what kind of scale are we working on?
Yeah, generally contests are for short form. So you might see flash fiction contests. I've participated in one of those before where you write a story in less than 1,000 words. Um, Oftentimes they are short stories and they can be divvied out by genre. Um, and then also you will sometimes find contests for first chapters of novels. Now, with that being said, if you are submitting something to a first chapter, um, like a first chapter contest, you should really think about it as a short story with book potential. There's this corporatese that you sometimes hear about in query letters where you're like a standalone with series potential. And that's the kind of thought that you should have when you're doing a first chapter. Um, there needs to be some kind of emotional arc inside of the first chapter. There needs to be some kind of resolution inside of the chapter in order for it to be super solid.
That makes sense. Do you have any advice for writing a self-encompassed first chapter? Because I know every time I'm in a short story class in college, I was like, I don't know how to write a short story. I only know how to write first chapters, like, and
Yeah.
yeah, give me your
Yeah.
advice for that.
Um, I think it's super important to think about what the problem is. Um, and really hone in on the problem and make sure that the scale of the problem is appropriate to the length of the story. Because if your problem is that there's an evil overlord that is like killing all the dragons, that may not fit in a short story, like resolving that problem. What might fit inside of a short story is there's this evil overlord who's killing all the dragons, and our character finds a dragon egg and has to decide whether to turn in the dragon egg and, get riches untold or whatever, or keep the dragon. Like that conflict is a short story level conflict.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I will say a quick aside. I have been trying to learn to write short stories. My writing group and I recently did like a little short story competition among ourselves.
Yeah.
And I'm like actually in love with the short story I wrote. Like I hated it for a little bit, but now I like it probably because I got positive feedback on it.
Uh-huh.
It's a story of it's called Vampire Ex-Boyfriend, and they didn't give me any better title suggestions, even though I specifically asked for them. But it's about a guy and he's going up to his ex-boyfriend's apartment, and his ex-boyfriend is a vampire. and you learn about a third of the way into the story that his ex-boyfriend has been killing all of the people that he goes on dates with. So
I love that.
it's like the way my boyfriend described it was this is a comedy based around horror elements because it's not really a horror.
Yeah, but it's like black humor.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm just very proud of that and I wanted to share that because I'm finally like starting to understand what it means by story problems that can be resolved within like the scope of a short story, which is like, up to 5,000 words
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
generally.
And picking a good conflict or picking a scalable conflict is super important because that will determine everything else. The other important bit with the other important bit that I would say about
Short story.
short stories is that the ending really matters. And if the ending doesn't stick, then the it's kind of how I feel about the sequel trilogy for Star Wars, where I thought that they were doing something kind of interesting in the seventh and the eighth movie, but then the ninth movie was so objectively terrible that it just ruined everything else. Um, and then, in my opinion, Twilight had the opposite problem, where the beginning was so terrible, but then the ending was like actually kind of passable. Um, that it kind of redeemed the entire series inside of my mind. I recently went through and watched all of the Twilight movies, because
Okay.
one of my coworkers was paying me to do it. Um, there,
Iconic. I
there's a
will say that's
story
probably the
behind it.
only situation in which I would ever watch Twilight because I've never seen Twilight. Like it was played in the background at a party I was at one time, but I was babysitting other people who were drunk because they were very drunk,
Oh my goodness.
and I was like the only sober person. It was such a mess.
Shoot.
Um, yeah. So like I've seen Twilight, did not retain any of it because I was busy making sure my friends like kept their clothes on.
Well, let me tell you, you weren't missing much if it was the first Twilight movie,
It
because
was the first one.
okay, most of that is garbage. But we can talk about Twilight a little bit later. What's the next question?
Let me figure out what the next question is. Talk about like local contests for me.
Oh yeah, so I mentioned that local contests are super super great for being able to connect to writer communities. And if you are submitting to a local contest, it's actually really fun from a judge's perspective to have some kind of local setting. So the contest that I was judging for is for the one of the Salt Lake chapters of the League of Utah Writers. And one of
Mhm.
the stories that I really loved from this past set of stories actually took place inside of a rural farming community in Utah, like northern Utah. Um,
Oh.
and that actually made me really engage with it because it was really cool to see how they incorporated the setting of a place that I am passingly familiar with into a speculative fiction setting. So that can be a really good way to it can be a good way to like engage with the fact that you are writing for a local audience. But I think it also helps add to the culture of the place where you live because you are producing art about the place where you live. And I think that there's value in that.
Yeah, that is super cool. I think I just have one more question. Um, do judges leave comments on the stories? And if they do, generally how much like commentary should we expect?
Ooh, this is a great question. If it is a super big contest, the answer is probably no. If it is a smaller local contest, then it is probably yes. Um, so when I was judging, I aimed to give about 3 paragraphs of feedback. That being said, my first paragraph was always an explanation of why I gave the numerical ratings that I did, and just clarifying that a 10 out of 10 or like 100% is not actually feasibly possible. Um, so to kind of like reframe a win kind of is like the purpose of that first paragraph that I put on all the rubrics. But then the second, third, and sometimes fourth paragraphs were about these are the things that I liked. This was my major hang up with the story.
Mm-hmm.
And then kind of tied it up there. So it's not like the comments were not super long. And the only thing that I would say is that we love reading your stories. It's just that we're reading so many of them that we can't write a dissertation about every single one. So any comments are better than no comments. And we do hope that your comments or the comments that we give you are helpful. I actually remember my first year that I was judging. I read a story and I could just tell by the way that things were written and the ideas presented inside of the story that the person who wrote this was a young author who was trying out writing for maybe the first time and who was super passionate about their story and about their world. Even though some of the form things like the kind of the artistry were, the mechanics stuff were kind of lacking. And one of the things that I really wanted to make sure inside of my comments was saying that I recognize your passion and you should keep developing it, even if you're disappointed with like the score that you got, because it's part of the learning process. And so sometimes as judges, we can pick up on those things. And we are people and we are part of the communities that you are a part of often. And so we want to we're here to stoke your flames and to encourage you inside of your passion. We are not here to say this is dumb, you're a horrible writer, never write again. Like nobody is ever going to say that. If they do, you can always, always talk to the organization. Sorry, that's terrible. And I've done it twice in this
The
episode.
hosting organization, I think is
The
what you've been
hosting
trying to say.
organization. Thank you. You
Yeah.
can always alert the hosting organization to something like that happening because the hosting organization is not going to invite a judge to come back who is offering that kind of feedback to writers because that's not what we
It's not
want.
constructive.
No, not at all.
Judges should be giving constructive feedback, even if it is a little critical, but it's not only criticism of you and your work, and it should never be criticism of you as a writer,
Right.
is my understanding of it, at least.
Yes, that is very true.
Okay. I think I'm out of any questions. Is there anything else that you wanted to touch on?
No, I just would, yeah, that's really what I got. Look out for your
Perfect.
local contests, and go participate. They're so much fun.
Yeah, and if you win, we should talk about what you get if you win. I think it depends on the competition, but I think often there's a small cash prize, and sometimes
Yeah,
there's publication in an anthology.
Yeah, exactly. The prizes will vary. That's one of the drawbacks of local contests is that the rewards tend to be a little bit lower, but publication is a big one, and it's an awesome one for being able to get your name out there.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Zach, for sharing your experience. Listeners, this has been Quid Pros Quo. Please tune in next week to hear us talk about our reading life in a book club episode. Thank you so much.
Quid Pros Quo is hosted by DC Winters and CK Jensen. If you like this episode, be sure to leave us a rating. And if you'd like to contact us, you can email us at quidprosquo@gmail.com. For more episodes, check us out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever else you get your podcasts.